Have you ever started out watching a comedy movie that before long becomes a drama and you're like, what did I get myself into? Speech genres are kind of a similar way of categorizing speeches that we do and knowing what your audience expects. Because if you don't know what you want to achieve in your presentation, neither will your audience. And that's where speech genres do come in. We'll talk about different forms of speech genres. We'll look at the culture and forms. We'll talk about Aristotelian genres and genres of our time and what you can expect if you have a speech genre violation. Speech genres are many names for sets of expectations. It's like I mentioned with a book or a movie or even a TV series. We have expectations just by looking at what the genre is. If we're watching a detective show and it turns into a musical, or a musical that turns into a comedy, these can become violations and your audience doesn't know where you're going. So this is a part of your audience analysis, is knowing what your audience expects. Where on the line does your speech fall as far as the speech genre? Is it a celebration, or is it informative? Are you trying to be persuasive? All three of these are important as you're crafting your speech, developing it, and even presenting it. Now, when you look at this, our culture, our society helps us decide what fits into what genre. We have expectations. When a commercial comes on, we expect that to be persuasive. When our show comes back on, we expect it to fall into whatever genre we're watching. So we are labeled partially by social influences on what is expected and by society overall as far as the reception of it and their enjoyment of your speech. When we look back in time, we go clear back to Aristotle, and he actually developed many different genres of which we still use today. The epidectic is the celebratory speech. We're looking at the present moment. We're celebrating the now. We're celebrating a person now. We're celebrating a company, something of that variety. The forensic is our judicial system. We're looking at the past, right and wrong. We're looking at aspects of something that has already occurred. Now, when we go into the decision-making process, we're looking at the deliberative, or that's our political system, where we're trying to build things better for the future. A decision now can help us be better in the future. So when we look at these are the three roots that our modern genres come from. Today, we of course have the celebration speech, the informative speech, and the persuasive speech. And in this class, we go and perform each of those presentations. So you'll begin with a speech that actually builds onto the others, because when you're looking at a celebratory speech, you're looking at the now, and that is part of how you connect with your audience in the moment. So you can kind of celebrate your audience in the now. But not only you're celebrating that, but you're trying to inform them, because you're trying to bless them, give them something better, greater to think upon. So that ties those two together. And of course, a persuasive speech isn't effective unless you have actual information there. Unless you build your ethos, your credibility with the audience, they'll struggle with being persuaded. So all these speeches are linked together and they build into each other. Now, violations can occur when someone's expecting one thing and you deliver something else. Maybe such as the movie Scream, where you're expecting just a straight up horror movie, but instead you get comedy thrown in there. And that's a type of violation. You can do the same thing. You can have a celebratory speech that actually becomes a persuasive speech, because you're celebrating a company or an organization, and at the end you're asking for a donation or some type of contribution which changes its lane. As I mentioned, you can have a really strong persuasive speech without having informative elements in it to educate your audience, to actually persuade them. So you can absolutely have a hybrid type of speech as well as you can have one that violates it. The problem with the violation is, of course, your audience might be turned off by it. If they've come in to learn something and you turn it into a persuasive speech, they might be upset, they might feel that they've been fooled. So violations, they can be effective, but you should watch for them and try to stick in your lane for genres, because that's part of your contract with the audience is, I'm going to give you an informative speech. I'm going to give you a persuasive speech. This way they understand what type of speech you're delivering. We talked about the different speech genres. We looked at how culture and society helps determine what genre is which, as well as we looked at Aristotelian genres, the root of where we get them, and we looked at the modern ones that we actually do and practice in this class, as well as what can happen with violations. It can be a positive, it can be negative, and it can be a hybrid. All three are possible. And our final thought to think about is, the more informative your advertising, the more persuasive it will be. Realize that yes, each presentation is distinct and different, but they all contain elements of the other one. And for persuasion, you absolutely have to have that informative piece in there.